bunch of misfits I ever said either.
Good morning, Misfits. You are tuning into another episode of the Misfit Podcast. On today's episode, Hunter and I are going to be talking about how we think about the world of skill acquisition. This is one of those topics that I think gets talked about a lot, and there is a lot of nuance to it, but the intensity that you need to bring to it oftentimes is an intensity of patience, and a lot of people don't want to do that over a long period of time. But before we get into that, make sure you head to misfitathletics.com to get signed up for a 7-day free trial of all of the programs. A lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about in today's episode is built into our programs, and you can do a 7-day free trial. You can also get a free trial of Team Misfit affiliate programming, the artist formerly known as Team Misfit affiliate programming. That'll take me a while to change. Misfit affiliate programming on SugarWad, or you can head to teammisfit.com and get started there. Before we jump into skill acquisition, life chat. Hey, Hunter, what's up?
Drew. Not much. Went down to New York City for Thanksgiving, which was exciting. Visited Little Italy for the first time.
Ooh.
Also very exciting. Got some pizza. Yeah. Would recommend. Felt like it was like a Dave Portnoy reviewable pizza spot. You know,
okay.
Probably would have dropped like a solid 7.5 to 8. Like good rating. But
what is your favorite style of pizza?
Margarita, probably. I'm a traditionalist when it comes to that. At least like as far as evaluating the quality of a pizza place or pizza, it has to be like cheese or a margarita.
But what style? So like New York style, like
the only way I can describe styles is just by visually describing the pizza, because I just can't fucking remember. I do like the thin, like a really thin, crispy crust, which I think is that's New York style. Yeah. Yep. I really like that. I mean, man, you find a good like deep dish pizza. I also don't know the difference between deep dish and Chicago style. I think it's that the sauce is on top on one and not on the other, but I can't remember which. So I just
I think the one you're talking about is Detroit style, which they do in the pan.
Yes.
That's
like a deep wall, like the thick crust is. Yeah.
That's that's like a practical version of deep dish pizza is insane. Like true
deep dish is the one with the sauce, like Chicago style, and the sauce is on top, right?
Yeah, and there's like I'm not complaining, but there's like 6 pounds of mozzarella on top of the, like a piece is like a piece of, I don't even know, fucking shepherd's pie. Like it's packing
thick. Okay. Yeah. Then I would say more. I'd probably say I haven't had like a good Chicago style deep dish pizza. Then good Detroit style pizza.
I went to the place that Oprah like says is the best because she's a Chicago person. I'm trying to remember. We were driving across the country. I don't remember why we were there. Might have been just when I was in college, driving back and forth from Maine and Colorado. But it was good. But like, I don't even know that it's pizza.
Yeah,
it's kind of a different thing. So it was good, but like, it's not the kind of thing that you would order and like I don't know how long it would take over the course of a week to finish one of those pizzas.
Yeah,
it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, no, I'd say probably a New York style pizza is if I had to pick. So
there's actually a gluten-free Italian restaurant, 100% gluten-free Italian restaurant in Little Italy that's really fucking good. And like I don't think most people would know that it was gluten-free if they just went there. They just like walked.
I feel like you were talking about that recently.
Yeah, it was fucking good. I had literally every dish. It's like, all right, I need a pizza, baked ziti, lasagna. Let's go. Come on.
Yeah, so did that, and then told you guys yesterday I did a couple of Peloton classes, more fitness related. But my brother's got a Peloton just in his apartment, but I'd never used the done like a class because we just go to hotels that have a Peloton, but it doesn't actually like log in, so you just I just pedal for 45 minutes in zone 2. But I actually like took a class, and I can see why people like it. It's fun. Time goes by pretty quick. Get a good sweat. Like,
yeah, I feel like that's the biggest thing is if you are like even for us, there are times when you go to do a zone 2 session and we're fucking absolute nerds and you're just like, do I want to do this? Like, do I want to just sit there, especially if it's the kind of machine or whatever where you're not going to like listen to something or watch something. Do I really want to do this? So it's like, if that barrier to entry is there for us and we're obsessed with fitness, how high is that barrier to entry for the general public?
Yeah.
So let's get a screen in front of them and distract them. Like,
yeah, it's funny. I was also listening to a podcast recently, Stacy Sims on Huberman. And the podcast was about women.
Women are not small men. Is that her?
Yes. Yep. But she got to a point where she was, and I think it's like general good advice. The problem with fitness, like as a whole, is that most people don't try hard enough to get the benefits that they're after, and instead, like, that's why. And she was referencing women just because of, like, you know, call it cultural reasons, call it just general education about what exercise is. It's like the F45s, the Orange Theories. It's like, this is perfect because people feel it's kind of like the equivalent of a dopamine hit versus like a longer term sort of thing where it's like, I feel good immediately because I'm sweating, my heart rate's up. But the problem is that you went too hard to get the benefits of like aerobic exercise in zone 2. You did not go hard enough to get any sort of power or anaerobic benefit. And like, circle back to the Peloton, like as somebody who understands, like, okay, if she's telling me like, hey, you're going to go a little bit harder and then harder, my brain immediately is like, okay, I got 3 gears. Like, we're going to go real hard for that. When she says this, we're going to go kind of hard for this. And like, I can do that in my head, but I have 15 years of fitness and coaching experience that can do that.
Right.
The problem is the general population. It's like, I'm going to try a little bit harder, but like as soon as it starts to burn, like, oh, let's crank the old resistance knob down a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, some fitness is better than none, but it's also some fitness that is almost completely useless. And if you don't try hard.
Yeah, you're not manipulating your metabolic rate to change.
Exactly.
Yeah, you have to go hard or you have to do a lot of volume to manipulate your metabolic rate. And we actually talked about this in, I don't remember, maybe the Engines podcast, but we talked about it honestly in each one. Like, the amount of lifts that you do times the weight that's on the bar is how you get, like, you either have to do really heavy and not very many reps or not that heavy and a ton of reps. And with fitness, the level of intensity multiplied by how long you go is what makes the change. So if it's medium intensity and medium duration.
Yeah, we're kind of in junk mile, no man's land territory. Yeah, the basal metabolic rate thing was good, like a good reminder, because it's like the idea is like you elevate your cortisol levels enough that it's like you're stressing your body out, which happens during exercise. But the problem is that you've elevated your cortisol levels and your heart rate and your basal metabolic rate to a point where it's stressful on your body, but is not going to elicit an adaptation. We either need to really stress it out with like that high power output stuff, and then we can get adaptation that way, or like go to the other end, go really low intensity, but for a long time, where we're stressing a different energy system. But that middle portion is where most people live in fitness. It's like, I'm trying hard, but not so hard that it hurts. And that's where, like, I think a lot of people just get lost. And that's why they don't make progress. So join us at Misfit Gym Portland, where we will beat your head into the wall in such a way that adaptation will occur.
Well, speaking of that, this podcast, we won't be like telling anyone anything because this podcast will drop after. But tomorrow is the opposite side of that coin. It's 3 by 120 calorie row. You better do that. You better do that, Hunter.
Nah, I got a rest day queued up for tomorrow.
Yeah, I fucking bet you do.
I'm sick that day.
You're gonna jog some fucking 19 miles on the treadmill.
I think I need a nice low intensity session.
Yeah, I think I can stay focused. We talked about staying focused, so I'll just stay over here. But yeah, I mean, we got depending on how slow you go, you're looking at 3 by 2K at the gym. It was kind of a fun conversation to have in the programming meeting of being like, how long can we have them go? Like, what's appropriate, what's not like death for everybody. And I'd say 3 by 6 to 7 minutes is pretty nice.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm definitely sick tomorrow. I'm already calling out. That's one of those days where you look at the day that pops up and you forgot that you programmed it, and you're like, "What the fuck was I like? Why did I do that?" Like you could have chosen anything. Could have been fun.
Yep.
Could have been a good
Could have
time.
been.
Could have been. It's
You
not.
got 12
Not gonna
minutes of
be.
rest, 12 to 14 minutes of rest built in. That's fun.
No, it's
right?
1-to-1. It's 1-to-1. Maybe it's worse.
No, I mean total across
Oh,
the
yeah,
two.
yeah.
You get those two rest
Yep.
periods. Yeah. On the opposite end of the spectrum, I'm doing work on getting rid of the pumpkin cheesecake leftovers, and I ate it
But
really
those calories
large.
are still inside you for sure.
Yeah. I ate a very large piece on Sunday right before bed, and I got a real bad sleep score. So
What?
last night I ate it at maybe 7:30.
Better.
Still pretty. I mean, I went up 5 points,
All right. Yeah.
but I'm
Linear
like 20
progression.
points below where I'm normally at. So
Gonna eat
tonight,
your pumpkin cheesecake at 4:30 p.m.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, but it's like I get it once a year. It's in my fridge. I can't help it.
Wait, do you just buy it? You just buy a big pumpkin cheesecake?
No, Maya makes it every year.
Ah,
It's so good. It's amazing.
homemade? She make it
Yeah.
herself?
Yep.
Oh.
Yep. It's incredible. So I probably got 3 more nights of cheesecake, I think. Somewhere in that range. Or
By Friday,
I
it's
could do the right
breakfast.
thing. I could do the right thing and just eat all of it tonight.
Yeah, I was gonna
Really
feed
get
it to your
through it.
feed it to your son. Make him.
Yep. He hasn't really had sweets yet. Kid hasn't had sweets. He hasn't watched a TV. He's just living in this little fucking primal cocoon.
It's fucking crazy. One of my best friends, they just had their first baby, and like she will be like the dad will be like feeding her, and she's just insubordinate and shirtless is her. It's just like not cooperating. As soon as you give her a like small inject so it's like to help with gas bubbles, you probably know what it is, but it's like a small injected like just liquid, not injected, like you squirt it in the mouth.
Whoa, I do not
No.
know about that. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, just straight in the
Is this
thigh.
baby on Ozempic?
EpiPen. No, just like a syringe of just liquid into her mouth, and it's like a little bit sweet, so that it's palatable.
Yep.
Immediately stops crying, and it's just like, this is amazing. It's like even the smallest amount of sugar, and the mom, even when she said, she was like, when I was pregnant, if I would eat something sugary, like the baby would calm down. It's like, holy fuck! Like,
Oh yeah, it's crazy.
it's addicted to sugar.
My son is definitely addicted to berries, but like can't eat that many. They got fiber in them. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But dude, his diet is crazy. It's incredible. It's literally like meat, avocado, berries, vegetables, like every meal.
Sick.
Hammers all of it. Eats every bit of it every time. It's fucking
Running around with cheese graters and shit.
Yeah, that's true. He basically now his thing is if I'm not chasing him, he'll start running anyways and yell, "Get you," because I say I'm going to get you when I'm chasing him. So you just hear him laughing, running around the house going, "Get you, get you."
Nice.
So I'm getting like probably at least 1,000, if not 2,000 steps in a day by chasing him around
just
in
chasing
circles.
a kid. Yeah.
He laughs
Nice.
like his ass off the entire time. It's
Nice.
great.
It's kind of like a little puppy dog. It's just like
Honestly,
looks at you and like
very
kind of wagging
similar.
his tail. Like, come on, let's play.
Supposedly, you notice the difference between, it's a funny thing to say, but I'll give it context. You notice the difference between your dogs and your children after age 2. A 2-year-old is roughly as smart as a dog. And then that obviously, hopefully, improves for the human at some point.
Yeah.
But you can like kind of understand. It makes a lot of sense. It's like, how's the, like, because dogs don't say anything, obviously, so you don't know where they're at. But supposedly, from an intelligence standpoint, it's about a 2-year-old. All right. Practice, skill acquisition. So I have a little thing that I wrote out here, and it is paraphrasing a bit, and it's from multiple sources. So Logan Gelbrick A lot of people know him as the owner of Deuce Gym out in California. He said he worked through this with Carl Paoli, who, if you're an OG CrossFitter, you know who he is, kind of CrossFit gymnastics, that sort of thing. And it was one of those things where it's like a light bulb moment of, we started having the practice sessions on the website as part of the programming, which I thought was really necessary, and actually a conversation that Hunter and I had, I think the first time on a podcast, where we were like, remember when we used to practice like in sports, and like this thing that felt complicated became routine because we practice it? And it's like, we don't really do that in CrossFit. There's just an element of intensity that's applied to all of this stuff. So we put it into the programming, and then Logan was explaining this concept that he gave a lot of the credit for it to Carl Paoli, but really just kind of a light bulb moment for me, and I think a really cool way to talk about what practice is, especially for your type A athlete who's like, I have to be perfect, I have to do X, Y, and Z, etc. So I am going to read this. Practice is not doing the thing, it's coming back to the thing. Meditation is not the moments when your breath is on point and you see the blue sky through the clouds and your mantra is money. Meditation begins when the mind drifts and you make a choice to return to the practice. Practice is noticing when you deviate and coming back to the thing. The finish line is also the start line. We do the thing, we fuck it up, we come back to it over and over. If you come back, you're in the game. If you pick up your toys and go home, you're not.
I like it.
I just thought it was really interesting to frame it as like, if you're doing the thing and expressing it in this perfect way, or the way that you intended for it to be, are you really practicing, or are you showcasing, expressing your fitness, expressing your skill, etc.?
Yeah. When I read that briefly before we started, and I also yelled at you across the office and said, prepare for a lot of golf swing metaphors and talk when it comes to practice. But the one thing that I noticed as the other weekend I was watching college golf. They were doing like their national championship, and I watched enough professional golf this past season to notice the difference, however slight it is, between the professional game and Division I college. And like, they're obviously all exceptional golfers, but I'm looking at some of the approach shots, which is, for people listening, that's like from the fairway onto the green. It's the shot that you hit trying to get the ball onto the green. And like, the professional game has such a high level of control that you can tell it's like, okay, I'd expect a professional to hit this within 15 feet and with a level of control of the golf ball that like parks that ball exactly where they want it, roughly.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The collegiate game, it's like, you can tell that it's just not quite as tight. It's maybe, instead of 15 feet from the pin, it's 25 feet. You're still putting, which is awesome, but like the level of control just isn't quite there. And it made me kind of realize it's like, the only difference between a CrossFit Games athlete and a recreational CrossFitter is like the level of perfection of all of the things that they do. Like, I can hit my 4-iron the same distance as a professional golfer once. I can't do it repeatedly, and I can't do it consistently. They can do it automatically every single time. A CrossFit Games athlete can hop up to the rings and perform a set of 5 flawless muscle ups every single time. You at the affiliate level, you might be able to do one muscle up reasonably well one time when you're like fresh, but the difference isn't necessarily like, this person isn't so exceptionally better. They just have so many more repetitions and so much more practice time with that movement, and with like the little movements that compose the larger movement, that they're just better at that thing across the board in all kind of aspects of it. It's the same movement. It's just the consistency and the quality of which is just so much higher at the highest level.
Yeah, and the different modes of intensity that we talk about all the time come into play here. Because when I would think of golf, so my framework that I use with coaches and remote athletes for skill is walk, jog, run. The question at the end of it is sprint, question mark. So when I get done running with the skill, can I sprint with it? Can I just let it loose? And anytime that I watch sports at the higher and like intermediate levels, the difference to me is being able to execute at this absurd level of intensity.
Yeah.
So like I remember as a kid, we always went to college hockey games. We always went to watch University of Maine play kind of when they were in their heyday. And we went to a Bruins game for the first time. And the speed of the skaters, I mean, I was a little boy and I was like, what is that? Like I felt like I couldn't watch it. It didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
And it was like they're doing the exact same things, just like you said, but that speed. And then in football, like they honestly do a disservice when they do all the slow-mo, because it's like that guy's running as fast as a car.
Yeah.
And adjusted like midair to make a one-hand catch or something like that. But you bring up the instance of where does that intensity go? And when the intensity needs to be dropped down, the intensity of focus to me is about like the layering within the movements. Like there was an athlete out in the gym practicing her muscle up skill progression yesterday. And the things that you would ask someone to do while they're working on that just become so much different as they improve on the skill. Like we can almost always iterate and make this thing better, make this thing cleaner, like that sort of thing. So it's like, where does the intensity need to go?
Yeah.
And it's a extremely interesting topic to me. And I think once an athlete realizes what it takes to improve on a skill, there's a freedom that opens up and you can play around with things and really figure out how to move.
Well, yeah, you can like at the lowest resolution level, like take the muscle up, for example, it's the like, do I get from below the rings to on top of the rings? It's like, that's the lowest barrier. That's like the muscle up is complete. Then it's like, well, like how tight is the kip? How big is the kip? How high do I bring my feet? How high do I bring my knees before I turn over? Where do I pop my hips? Do I pop my hips upward? Do they go slightly forward? The further you get into something, the higher level of resolution you can look at a skill, look at a specific task. And when you do that, and then you think about how many movements that we expect or athletes need to be proficient at in CrossFit, it's like, is it literally impossible to perfect everything, right? There's so many levels, like, and there's an element of when it comes to skill progression, it's like, if you're new at something, it's like, you don't even know what questions to ask. You don't even know what skills you need to work on. It's like muscle up, below ring, above ring. It's like, okay, we have a very broad understanding of what's happening here, but like a proficient coach is like, okay, like how high resolution can we get on the very nitty-gritty details? And that's where it's like, hey, you've got so much room to improve, and therefore so many things that you can be working on with a given movement to improve it.
The cool thing with this, and we alluded to it in one of our more recent episodes, is the universal application. The context for which this idea was explained to me was actually based on leadership. So it's like, you're putting out into the world with your team as a leader that this is what we're striving for. And you're very public about the execution of that thing. And because we're humans and we're fallible, you will fuck up as the leader. And again, the question is, do we go back to the start line when we fuck up? It's like, do we start over? Do we retry again? Do we do it that way? And again, I just like when we can go into these things that we learn in the gym and push them out into the real world. Yeah, I mean, so skill within the context of the sport of CrossFit has an interesting spin on it. You alluded to, can I get my muscle up? That is sometimes the way that we get our muscle up, or the way that we heave ourselves up to that first handstand push-up, is not advantageous towards multiple reps, right?
Right.
So we go from, can I do it once? Hell yeah. Like, that's one of the most fun things that happens in CrossFit.
Achievement unlocked.
Like someone gets up over the bar muscle up is one of those ones where like, because there's this stupid object in the way, you see someone ram their body into a bar however many times and they realize they need to go around it and over it. Like that's one of those ones where it's like amazing. Then we have to figure out how to do it quite a few times, which can be complicated. But if you are willing to walk and then jog, it just takes time more than anything.
Yeah.
But then how many times can you do it at, I wrote in the notes, how many times can you do it at RPE 67 million? Like you don't just need to be good at the skill. You need to be able to sprint on the Echo bike and then jump up and do 15 muscle ups, whatever the crazy thing is that they're asking you to do. And that is sort of an overview of walk, jog, run, which I think applies universally. But again, the level at which you need to figure out this stuff within the sport of CrossFit is, I don't know, it has a lot of complexity to it, again, which I like because I like the layers. I like for athletes to know where they're headed next.
Yeah. A little mechanics, consistency, intensity.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, like, fuck. Connor McDavid was the immediate person I thought of when you come to that. It's like, that is,
he might be the best example. My God.
He's the best hockey player on the planet. It's like you've got a lot of guys who are really, really fast in the NHL. You've got a lot of guys who can handle the puck really, really well in the NHL. There is a finite number who can handle the puck extremely well while they're skating extremely fast. And that's just kind of that next iteration in sports. Is it like, and the hockey example there is Connor McDavid. Like he can skate at nearly top speed and handle the puck and know what's going on around him.
I was going to say the vision is the craziest part to me.
The IQ is stupid.
He is I believe he's 2 levels ahead of almost everybody because to be able to skate and move the puck like that, like there's usually at least one guy on an NHL team where like, that if he has the puck entering the zone, that like, there's a good chance he might just fly past people and like be in like a scoring or passing position right off the bat. He's faster, but his body language, like his shoulders and his head, they look slow. Like he's just scanning the ice. It looks so effortless. Like a lot of guys in hockey that skate fast look like they're trying real fucking hard. It's kind of a funny thing to watch. Not him. I don't even understand where the power comes from. It doesn't even make any sense.
Yeah,
to
his
me.
ability to like dissociate his lower half from his upper half to like move forward without like losing control of his body and then therefore the puck. It's stupid. But that's the highest level example of that.
Yeah. All right. So walk, jog, run. Again, just a framework to use to, for example, in this podcast, keep me sort of locked in on what we're trying to talk about, less tangents, but also just a really good example of how you want to think about this thing. So for me, the very first thing that needs to happen, whether you're a coach or whether you're an athlete, to start the walk portion of this is to turn the noise off and think about things from a first principles standpoint. I know, like, kind of a hot topic right now, whether you love or hate Elon Musk, I don't give a fuck. I will use the parts of what he puts out into the universe that I like, and I don't really have any investment in his personal life. It doesn't have anything to do with me. He is famous for first principles thinking being brought into these like incredibly complicated bureaucratic environments. So he walks into a room and like one of the problems with these huge Fortune 500 companies, there's these mega machines that can't do small tasks. They can put a man on the fucking moon and they like can't change the font on their paperwork because they need approval from 6,000 people. So when you go and look at a problem, it's complicated. And the way that I would say to translate this into the gym is if you took a novice coach or athlete and had them watch someone in real time try to do a muscle up or try to do a squat snatch at a very heavy weight and then ask them like, what do we do now? You can be like, I don't know, get out a magic wand. Like, and that's when people say things like that person's not strong enough, that person's not fit enough. They don't have the body type for this. They have long femurs. Like, we complicate the problem. But the beautiful thing is we can use first principles thinking to say, what are the component parts of a muscle up, of a squat snatch, of a handstand walk, anything? What is the starting point? What happens after that? And what happens after that? And what happens after that? And in most instances, we can find a way. There's so many amazing coaches out there. We can find a way to turn this into, like, you would think that there's no like long progression towards a handstand walk because like you're balancing out in space. How would that even be possible? I promise you, there are tons of ways to get people their handstand walk by breaking it up into its component parts. So we need to know the like step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Once you've done that, that's when the intuition of a coach comes into play, or somebody who just loves human movement, of like, how do we turn that into a progression? Because again, there are movements where like, I can't pause someone mid muscle up and be like, okay, so this is what you're doing here. I need you to do this here. So that's when it can get kind of complicated. But anytime you are overcomplicating it as a coach or as an athlete, like, what's step 1? Like, and you can be really granular with this. Like step 1 of a back squat could be bracing, before even talking about like maybe one of the reasons why when they bounce and their ass comes up is because they never had their midline. So there's like a lot of ways to think about it.
Yeah, I like to do that with if I'm trying to think, an example I had, I was doing a front squat set. I was taking a class with one of my coaches, and there was another couple coaches in the class, and I saw somebody squatting, and hips were basically, butt was shooting up out of the bottom of the squat. That was probably like the obvious thing that I would, a reasonably proficient coach would probably be able to identify. And I'm like, hey, watch this. Like, what's wrong with the squat? And I kind of ask the 2 coaches that are there, and they're just like, oh, the hips are shooting up. It's like, excellent. Why? It's like, well, they're coming out of the bot. They're not keeping their chest up. Why aren't they keeping their chest up? And it's like, why? Go all the way back, as far back as you can, to like, what happens before they even start squatting? It's like, oh, their weight is forward in their toes. Okay, their weight's forward. Their chest is going to go forward. Their hips are going to go forward. They hit the bottom of the squat. Their hips go up. Their hips go up and back, and now their chest is forward, and they're trying to fight to finish the squat. So it's not like, as an athlete or a coach, it's not about identifying. It's great, like, identify the obvious thing, but the obvious thing is almost always like, we got to, like, why is that thing happening? Okay, well then why is that thing happening? And all of a sudden you go back down, and like you said, there's like, there are a finite number of fundamentals in basically every movement that we do in CrossFit. And it's just about being able to identify them as the coach or the athlete, and going as far back to like the foundation as possible. Because if you don't have that foundation, this is why we talk about things like, hey, if your mobility sucks, like, I don't care how many squat snatches you do, they're going to suck until you improve your shoulder mobility. That's first principles for you, for example. And then going back, like, you go back as far as you can to the foundation, perfect the basics, and then you can build from there. But until you have that, you're putting Band-Aids on, open arteries.
Yeah, and if the sequence is off to start, how are you supposed to execute, right? Like, the amount of times that I've asked an athlete to start doing kip swings, and the second they jump up to the bar, I'm like, nope, come down. Or like in the front squat, no, re-rack the bar. Like, I don't like the way you're touching the bar.
Yeah, I already know where this is going. I don't even need
exactly.
to do squat. I know where this is headed.
And you need, and sometimes you get the eye roll, and it's like, if we aren't doing this part right, then we are going to try to like correct the whole time throughout this movement. You're going to be fighting the thing that you did wrong to open.
But then you will inevitably get all the way back, right, to the initial to the root cause. It's like, okay,
yes.
So so push your hips back in the squat. Okay, got it. I still came forward. Yes, I know that. That's because your weight, like, you weren't evenly distributed in your weight before you even started the squat. Like, let's skip a good coach. Hey, let's skip all of the okay, now that you fix that, let's fix this. Now that you fix that, we'll fix this. It's like, no. Like, let's get down to the actual root cause of the problem, and then work upward from there.
From the point of identifying the component parts and then breaking those up into a progression, the like subcategory here is program, schedule, execute. It might sound boring that I'm saying that because you're literally like, okay, write down the thing that I'm supposed to do. Then when
We are
I'm
now in
supposed
the
to do
jog phase of walk, jog, run, correct?
No, we are still in walk. We haven't actually done anything yet. We've only identified what to do.
You got program. Okay.
Yeah, program, schedule, execute. I say that
I see.
because the athlete could get bored. So when I leave a session, if a member here says, help me get my muscle up, when I leave a session, it's how many days a week am I doing this? When am I doing it? And then like send me videos or whatever. Create a framework that actually gets you to do the thing that you said you were going to do. Like try to set something up where it's like, I feel like I'm like beholden to this thing that I need to get done versus I don't like your kip swing. You should probably work on those at some point. Walk back into my office. And then the person's like, I got bored on day 3, that sort of thing. In terms of how to program, schedule, and execute, and maybe we can go over some examples, it has to be based on the physical demands of what the practice is. So like if you're practicing something that has a larger amount of like muscle fiber breakdown or central nervous system fatigue attached to it, you can't do it a billion times. You can't just do it over and over and over, that sort of thing. So make sure you're paying attention because everyone who's listening to this podcast is either trying to compete or coach or at least do really well in their workouts in the gym. And if you decide that you're going to do strict pull-ups 19 days a week and your hands are bloody and you go to do toes to bar and you don't want to grab the pull-up bar, whatever, there's all kinds of different examples. So just make sure that it fits within the program of what you're actually doing. And then the walk phase is repeat this until the baseline skill is achieved. So like this could be the front squat example, and you have a few weeks of squat holds and some form of like barbell therapy that would be with, doing tempo, empty bar squats to really feel your feet, feel the connection to the bar in your front rack position, whatever. And that, next time it comes up in class, we might be jogging. You might want to do a muscle up, a strict muscle up, a handstand walk, a strict handstand, whatever, this sort of thing. And the walk phase is a long time, right? Like we could get into an instance where you're walking for 6 months.
Yeah, I was about to say like the trajectory of this walk, jog, run is not linear by any means. You're going to spend a shitload. You should. And if you want to be able to run eventually, and eventually, like you said, sprint, like we have to have enough time in that walk phase to, one, just establish like literal neuromuscular connections, like the kind of brain-body connections to like wire your body. Like there's one thing that I've actually worked with Kelly on, for example. She moves extremely well, almost too well, to the point where it's like, hey, I actually need you to be comfortable with, in a competition setting, the idea of moving slightly less optimally in order to go faster. Like we're teetering on that like threshold of run sprint,
right?
Where it's like, I actually need you to go further than run. I need you to sprint. But that is because she has put so many hours and repetitions and good hours and good repetitions of practice that her natural like movement is nearly flawless. It's like my back was starting to round, so I dropped the barbell. It's like you were in a excellent, like, what the fuck? No, you weren't. Like, God damn it, pick the bar up. That sort of thing. But it takes a shitload of time in that walk phase, and it's like almost a flat line until you have wired yourself well enough to like jog. And if you've established that baseline in that walk phase, like the jog phase might not be that long because it's like, we just take off and see progress rapidly. It's the people who jump ahead where it's like, I'm like, I got 70% of the walk phase. Let's fucking send it and see what happens. It's like short-term mindset.
In her version of doing the thing and then coming back to it would be like, again, we just use the muscle up, like bitch gymnastics, bike sprint into muscle up.
Yeah.
And can I can I create threshold for you to flirt with the movement being not perfect, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you come back to it, and who knows what the actual what is the practice of? Is it the practice for her getting back to doing it exactly how she should? Or is the practice of it going back in again and not asking herself to be perfect, but to get the work done?
Yeah.
Yep. All right, let's talk about jogging. So once again, we need to program, schedule, and execute. This is when we would get into your Misfit sets, your ladders, your EMOMs, standard linear progression program to achieve low-level capacity. So Misfit sets are something that we basically designed to have 4 rounds of really deliberate practice on a movement. So the example would be 4 rounds, 1 smooth set of kipping handstand push-ups. So like, you're like, okay, I can do, my max set is 20, so I'm going to do 10s or something like that. So you get 4, these are supposed to look really good, but then your 5th set is as many as you can do. And you don't move up in your smooth sets until you can double the number from onto your max set. So again, you do 4 sets of 10 kipping handstand push-ups, and you finally get to a point where you hit 20 or 21 in your max set. You can now go up to 11 and then go up to 12, do that sort of thing. Ladders, I have found work best on pulling gymnastics for whatever reason. I think probably because they're more complex and you get to start over at a lower number once they start to break down. Whereas in the Misfit sets, you're either doing the same amount or more. So a ladder would be, I do 1 chest to bar pull up, drop down, shake my arms out, do 2, then do 3, then do 4. And once I start to break down, I stop, I rest, and I repeat that for maybe like 2 or 3 sets, something like that. And the linear progression there would be like, I'm climbing and now I feel comfortable. And once you feel like you're kind of doing maybe too many reps, we go up by 2s instead of 1s, like that sort of thing. And then probably the most common would be the EMOM. A lot of people like a 10-minute EMOM with 3 strict handstand push-ups and then 4 and then 5 and so on. But they're all iterations of program, schedule, execute, standard linear progression to achieve low-level capacity. That is our next step in this process.
Yeah, and I think the broad kind of the point of this is to accumulate really, really good repetitions at low intensity. And what low intensity means in this context is like, I'm not going to do a set of the movement that induces fatigue. Like, I'm going to do no more repetitions in this movement than I can do flawlessly, and probably even less than that. I personally, and especially at like the affiliate level, the EMOM is like probably the best tool in my opinion, because like, hey, I can get a 12-minute EMOM, a 15-minute EMOM is pretty reasonable to ask somebody to do in class. And let's say it is a kipping handstand push-up, or we could go with a barbell movement too, like a 2 squat snatches or a hang squats and even 1 rep. And it's like you have 15 opportunities to move, evaluate your movement, iterate, and then make an adjustment for the next one. With something like a Misfit sets where you only have 5 opportunities, you have to have a baseline capacity in that in order to kind of reap the benefit. So I would say for like a brand new skill, like your best bet is to do a shitload of sets of the movement with a very small number of repetitions. And that just ensures that the repetitions that you do are excellent. They're not fatigue inducing. And like, you can actually evaluate, you can feel like, oh yeah, I did that incorrectly, or my, I kipped, my kip was off a little bit, whatever it happens to be. You can make that evaluation and then you can adjust, and you've got 14 more sets to make that adjustment and improve. So lots of different ways, like you just said, to do that. And I think like the general theme is like, give yourself a shitload of opportunities to do a very small number of reps so that you can really focus on it before we start to beef up the sets or add intensity.
Yeah. And you continue to go through those things. You iterate and repeat until introducing the skill under fatigue is appropriate. And one of the ways that we learn, obviously, this is almost all based on learning through failure. So you're probably going to try too early, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. But I would urge you to go back to like, it's almost like on a day where you have the jog, the Misfit sets, the ladders, the EMOMs, like the walking is like your warm up. Like, am I moving really well? I got this like locked in, and then I'm jogging. you need a really high level of capacity before running, because there's a lot of different reasons. Could be injury, could be, the movement pattern could get, I don't know, tainted. Like you could completely change the way that you're moving and not really know it, that sort of thing. But really the jogging phase needs to be pretty constant. It needs to happen for a pretty long period of time. We're just continuing to iterate, and like it should pop up in your programming once it's appropriate, but it needs to also stay within the realm of practice.
Yeah, and this is also kind of a phase where like you get that first muscle up, right? You heave yourself over the rings. It wasn't pretty. Maybe there was a chicken wing. You kind of squirmed your way out of the bottom of that. That doesn't all of a sudden unlock like, oh, sick, we got a workout with muscle ups in it next week. Like, I got my muscle ups, like, let's get after it. It's like, no, probably not. Like, we need to spend time, probably still spend more time in the walk phase, like perfecting the small things. Then we can start to jog, add some volume, and accumulate some reps under low intensity. And I think that's where a lot of athletes at all levels, as they're trying to get better, it's like, I've unlocked the skill, or something clicked in a lift, and it's like, we're off to the races. It's like, maybe, but also like, probably not. Like the odds that you just perfected that movement in that one session is basically zero. So let's like, hey, good job. Like, sweet. That's another kind of rung on the ladder, but there's still like, there's still 30 more rungs to get to the top.
And again, in terms of mindset, how do we stay locked in when this could be a longer sort of time horizon? I think, again, going all the way back to the beginning of this topic, you hitting your first really good set is not necessarily practice. That is expression of the new skill that you have. It's when you're doing that set and when you finally introduce a level of fatigue in your EMOM, that you notice that you've deviated from the movement pattern that you worked on with your coach, and you go back to executing on it. That is when, like, and you see this happen in like such a beautiful sequence in a remote coaching situation. When the athlete starts to send you, I didn't like the way my turnover looked in these, or like the butt kick wasn't there, or I didn't let the bar travel to my hip. That's when we're really cooking with fire. That's when we're like starting to get to a point where it's like, I feel what's wrong and I'm going to go back and correct it.
That's that's funny. I was talking to a friend about that. That's where I've kind of found myself in my like progression with the sport of golf. It's like, initially you get out there and you hit a couple of really good shots and you feel excellent. And then all of a sudden things take a turn for the worst. It's like, I don't even fucking know if I know how to swing this goddamn golf club. And it's like the most frustrating thing on the planet. But then like, as you get and then it's like, okay, well, is it X? Is it Y? Is it Z? And you don't even know where to start with like, well, what did I do wrong? Could have been 600,000 things. As you get better, you start to identify like, there it is. So now for me in golf, it's like, if I'm swinging poorly or hitting a bad shot, it's like, I'm going to make sure, like, was my physical grip on the club correct? Was my foot position at address correct? Were my hips turned slightly too open versus like square to the golf ball? Like these super, super small things, but I have a very finite number of things that I can run through kind of my checklist. And most of the time it fixes it, or at least puts me in a spot where like, okay, I'm onto something. And you start to get to a point where it's like, there are only a few things you know of that are probably what's causing your error. And then you can fix them, and you're able to fix them quicker. Yeah. And then you can get back to practicing the movement correctly and well. So initially it's like, hooray, I got it. Tomorrow, I don't got it, and I don't know what's going on. It's like, okay, well, let's slowly trudge through that a little bit, and eventually it becomes, I don't got it, but I have a pretty good idea of how to fix it on my own. Yeah. And that's how that's another iteration of kind of moving in the right direction.
And again, nobody's above that. That's at the absolute highest level. That's when we're bordering on like Jedi level. And I think, I don't know if people noticed it or not, I sort of see the world through this lens in most cases. Bryson did his viral hole-in-one challenge that fucking took the internet by storm. And like, again, sort of like the slow-mo, Bryson doesn't see the ball tracker. He didn't see a fucking red line. And the ball's not even halfway over his house. and he'll say, pushed it, pulled it. Like he
Yep.
knows immediately.
Yep.
The dude's aiming for a hole this big.
Yeah.
Like it's like in the level of knowing exactly in his swing what is happening there. And it's just I find it fascinating to watch those guys. Like I'm not even really interested in golf, but from the coaching aspect, when they do those videos, like I don't think a normal person could get through them. They're so boring. He talks about grip for 19 minutes.
Yeah, he'd be an interest. If you don't, it sounds like you do, but if you don't watch him, he's super cerebral about that sort of thing.
And it's like, yes, that's what I'm talking. Those basics, they're everything. They're everything. You can't like, if I'm going to hold the club like this with knuckles pointing in opposite directions, nothing else that I'm doing is going to matter in my golf swing. So just the way he talks about those things is pretty crazy. All right. So now we have moved on to the running phase. Again, if you're going to make an omelet, you got to smash some eggs. Sometimes those eggs you'll throw them against the wall and they'll drip down the wall instead of into your bowl to make your omelet. Intervals first. That's one thing that we really try to put out there is just this idea of, I want you to experience the thing and then have time to rest and recover and also think about what just happened. Like go to your room and think about what you just did. We need those moments built in. That's why we do a lot of intervals at training camp. I need that 1 minute powwow with you about what changed as the intensity was sort of brought into this equation. So it's kind of funny. It's like the way that our Google Sheet works, but I sort of think about it in that order of like mobility's here, practice is here, intervals are here. They sort of go within that direction. The progression of interference is also really important. So like an example would be, we just talked about Kelly doing echo bike into muscle up.
Yep.
In an opposite scenario, we might do muscle up into echo bike.
Yeah.
And build in some fatigue round by round. And again, like you're just not in the same headspace. When you jump up to do a set of muscle ups knowing that the devil's tricycle is waiting for you on the other side, it's just not the same. And then as the workout moves on, you also won't feel the same.
Yeah.
So we can build in interference afterwards. And we really need to be thoughtful about the way that we are going to run interference on that movement, right? We're going to run interference in that interval in the instance that I was just talking about by having your heart rate be a little bit higher each time you go to do a set of muscle ups. At that point, we can then flip that order. But we can also do things where it's just like a general level of fatigue, your cardio stimulus. Can I set you up to just continuously have a higher heart rate? You're going through these things. Then we introduce more and more complexity to that. Like, are you going to row before a muscle up? Like,
so I was gonna
fatigue. Don't go too far at the beginning.
Yeah. The intervals, and when you said general advice, intervals first, are you talking just interval on that singular movement, or like an actual like couplet or triplet CrossFit interval?
So running, I think, is when we begin to introduce intensity.
Yeah, exactly.
To the
so
movement.
Like the EMOM, the ladder, the Misfit sets, and kind of the jog phase, those are intervals. Those are effectively intervals, right?
Yep.
And so now that we've developed a baseline level of capacity at, low to moderate intensity, the run phase is where we start to add that intensity, whether that's through volume of good quality repetitions, or like you're saying, interference with other movements, which is where like kind of the CrossFit aspect starts to come into place. And I think I think your example, you can almost think about it as like a progression of difficulty. Like initially we're looking at like mild, moderate cardiovascular fatigue without muscular interference, right? So
put them on the bike erg the first time that
exactly. So I'm like, hey, I'm doing like maybe for Kelly it is like, hey, you're gonna bike, you're gonna do your muscle ups, and then you're gonna bike afterward, and then you're gonna rest. So like the carryover of the metabolic fatigue is what's gonna make the next set of muscle ups difficult. Maybe the next one is like you're gonna C2 bike, so localized muscular fatigue that isn't in theory going to interfere with muscle ups, but your heart rate's up. So we get a little bit of both, and you're going to do that before you do muscle ups, and then you're going to rest. So we're going to make the muscle ups harder, like up front, but the muscles that you're using aren't necessarily directly interfering, then like you said, it's like, okay, so now we have capacity in with like an advanced movement under cardiovascular fatigue and even like, severe metabolic fatigue, like a kind of a gas tank stimulus. Now what happens when it's wall ball muscle up, row muscle up, in that order, right?
Right.
It's like specific interference, localized muscular fatigue and metabolic fatigue designed to make those muscle ups like extremely difficult. And that's just that's the progression, right? But that's not the first thing that we do. We don't go ski muscle up after you've proven you can do 3 unbroken muscle ups, right? It's like ways to.
And I mean, like, the athlete IQ thing is also huge here. Maybe you only did EMOMs and Misfits sets and you've literally never done 2 sets of a movement. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yep.
And then you're like, okay, I know I can do 10. And it's like, not after the ski erg, you can't. So like, do you know how you should break those up? That sort of thing. So that is the general advice there. I'm going to give a quick overview of the way that we would work this into our programming. And we do it in 2 separate ways. So one way that you would notice on a day-to-day basis is non-mandatory work. A lot of times when we're in our programming meeting and there is a cell that we know is non-mandatory, which means if you don't follow our programming, we tell you all the stuff you need to do, and then there's a way to personalize your program with those extra pieces. A lot of times this style of workout we talk about from a non-mandatory standpoint. Like, this is almost like kind of weakness work here. So we have, like rope climb, C2 bike or something like that. And we really talk through, is this set up in a way where the athlete can figure out how to go back and forth between these things and do it. So that's more of just a day-to-day basis of us working things in when we know that it's potentially weakness work. The other way that we do it is with our phase bias. And I think it would be possible for almost any coach to write something like this with the framework. I could be wrong. I could be so far down the rabbit hole that I think people are halfway down with me and they're not. So you can
looking
tell
down
me,
the hole, be like, oh man, that looks deep. You guys want lunch?
What's happening down there? So program, schedule, and execute, once again, Misfit Athletics phase bias progression. So we start with a test. Please, for the love of God, make the test appropriate. So that goes back to the things that we were just talking about. Like, is your very first run example like a muscle endurance test with a chipper that has a million of the movement that you just figured out? Yeah. That probably shouldn't happen. So the test should be appropriate. And there are a lot of different ways to make a test appropriate. Are we running interference with the other movements that are in it? Make sure that that's not too high. Are the other movements actually helping you? That sort of thing. So again, using the upper body example, like we send someone out for a run, or we have them do the C2 bike, something like that, and you have time to sort of recover, but your heart rate is still high. So the test needs to be appropriate, not just because it's going to be our metric for did you improve or not, but also because you're not really going to know anything or learn anything from a test that just doesn't make any sense for you. So from a coaching standpoint, make sure that your test is appropriate, specific to the athlete.
Yeah. And again, there's a bit of nuance there. Like, everybody's heard the term, like, he's in the zone, she's in the zone, whatever it is. And it's kind of that sweet spot of optimal performance. The task itself is like, I'm executing slightly better than I'm capable of, but I'm in that perfect slot of development. And that's actually where the term zone comes from. The guy who invented it, I think his name is Victor Yudkowsky. It's the zone of proximal development. And it's also the same principle as how you teach kids to speak. You speak at a slightly more, if you're talking to a 2-year-old, you try to speak at the level of a 3 or a 4-year-old. So it's just advanced enough that an adaptation can occur. But if you're talking to your 3-year-old like he's in a PhD course, it's like, that's too far. There's no adaptation that's going to occur. And it's the same thing in fitness. It's like, you need to be put into a situation where this is just slightly harder or slightly outside of what you believe or are capable of, but that is attainable, because it's like, I don't know if I can do this. I think I can. If you're presented with something that's like, this is fucking impossible. Like, I'm going to die. And that's what a lot of CrossFitters perceive is like how to make progress. It's like, I'm going to do fucking triple Murph with muscle ups in a vest. And like, that's the muscle up. It's like,
Right.
no, like it's too far in that direction. We need something that is just outside of what you currently are capable of, but could potentially be capable of, if things line up correctly. So like, it's about putting yourself in the zone, so to speak, of like, what is just appropriate enough to be like, I don't know if I can do this, but I might be able to.
I also believe that to be twice as appropriate for the mind of an athlete. So you're talking about maybe the general public, and the concept is really like, is this task worthy of them rising to the occasion? If you give them a boring task, they're not going to get in the zone. It doesn't require them to be there.
Exactly.
And I've had quite a few athletes who don't do well in tests and tell me that maybe they were kind of boring. Like, they're just like, like, it's just not quite. And of course, like, have you tried trying harder?
Go ahead, you can try.
My favorite hunterism. So that is part of it. But if they look at it on paper and you either can't sell them on it, or they just look at it and go, like, it just isn't. Like, there are some athletes, these would be the athletes who rise to the occasion in the open and quarterfinals at the CrossFit Games, and they're not like a showstopper on a Tuesday. They just go in and kind of do their thing. And there's just, I mean, you guys are all like, this is to the listeners, you're all fucking crazy. We all are. Like, you wouldn't be involved with this, you wouldn't be doing this. So I think it's twice as important when you're talking about the mind of an athlete to either write something that is worthy of them rising to the occasion, or again, telling them how they could, sort of doing that sort of thing. So that's going to be week 1 and week 9. We're going to test and we are going to retest. Obviously, a like staple of CrossFit, the test retest model, we're going to check back in 6 months on our Fran time, CrossFit total, all of these different things. And there's plenty of physical reasons why that's the case, and obviously many mental reasons why that's the case. We kind of sort of need that thing dangling out in front of us. Now, there's multiple ways to attack the middle, but I'll start with what would be the first iteration. So weeks 2 through 8, you would alternate between more jogging and putting it into the actual workouts. So if it's a newer skill, I usually say like weeks 2, 4, 6, and 8 are still jogging, still practice, still developing. And then weeks 3, 5, and 7, they're in the workout. And if, again, new skill, maybe it's all intervals. Now, as you get better and better, those can flip. Like, it can be appropriate for an athlete to be under intensity in weeks 2, 4, 6, and 8, maybe more Metcons. Again, like, this is a never-ending thing. Like, you think that you finally achieved it, and then you go work out against Tia Toomey, and you're like, okay, back to the gym, back to the rubber mats. Let's go get after it. And the way that the skill, if you are programming for an individual, would look, Hunter has already alluded to, we want to start week 2 or week 3 or wherever we're starting our skill progression with a shitload of sets of a small amount of reps. It's actually going to be the highest volume that you would do. Because again, lower intensity needs to be higher volume to make that adaptation. Hopefully it's going well and we can use linear progression, and you sort of like, let's say week 1 has 100 toes to bar in it and you're doing 10 by 10, and the final week of the skill progression is actually only 60 toes to bar, but it's 3 by 20 or something like that. The intensity is inside of the set versus spread out over the course. So that's how you would want the skill to trend. New skill, we've already talked about it, intervals and interference. The way that you run interference has to be very thoughtful. Once the athlete has gained some momentum and they're really just battling to be the tip of the spear, that's when CrossFit really comes into play and we need variance. We need to run interference intentionally with the super high heart rate, with the cardio element of there's just so many reps within this workout, with the interference of sort of muscle endurance, that sort of thing. we need short workouts, we need medium workouts, we need long workouts, we need couplets and triplets and chippers and all these different things, because you will find these moments where either the skill is exposed within the workout or the athlete IQ is exposed within the workout.
Yeah. At that point, we're stress testing it, right? We're like, now it's like, so we've tried to bulletproof this. We've built up some capacity. We've added some intensity, and it's like, all right, like what's gonna fuck me up? Like what is the combination of things that is going to stress test and find the chink in the armor? It's like, okay, so you can accumulate 50 muscle ups over the course of a workout. What happens if I slap 30 of them, think like the standard snatches, muscle ups, clean and jerk, 30 clean and jerks, 30 muscle ups, 30 snatches. It's like, is that the thing for you? It's like, what is the linchpin now? Where can we get you stuck? Where do we expose the chink in the armor? And then now we're trying to find ways to like prove that you're not as good as muscle ups as you thought you were, right?
Right.
Just with the purpose of making that person fitter.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have games. I mean, you think about the games programming where this stuff comes up. It's like, this chipper has a set of 50 muscle ups. Like, okay, what the hell happens to an athlete when they have to do 50? Because we see it all the time. The great muscle upper like overreaches in that workout and they're way ahead, and then they literally walk off the rings or start their next movement at the exact same time as the person who was like, I'm not very good at these. I'm going to do 5s and then 4s and then 3s. And,
yeah, I mean, we saw it like the first, I don't know if it was the first or second year of quarterfinals when it's like, fuck yeah, get to show off my muscle ups. It's like, oh yeah. It's like, did you know that you needed your hip flexors to do muscle ups? Turns out those GHD sit ups before an otherwise pretty manageable set of muscle ups is like, wow, like welcome to the Thunderdome. Like that's where, and that's when a test is well written, where it's like, oh, I did not expect this to get hard, and it got hard because of this other thing that I just didn't put together, right? And that's like, I think that's where good programming, I like to think we're pretty good at that, being like, I know this is going to be easy now, but like, hold my beer in round 4.
And the best athletes have that like ridiculous memory of the last X amount of workouts that they've done. And some people will say like, oh, you guys have predicted all of the workouts that they've done at all these competitions. And it's like, it's variance. That's what that is. But then when we get there, they're like, do you remember this one? And like, they go back to their notes and they're like, okay, so it was like this pace and whatever. I know what that's going to feel like. And like, maybe it's like, it looked easy on paper because it was a merry-go-round workout and then you didn't do the math on the total reps. And it's like, obviously we're gonna have to break at some point. This workout's got, 150 stand push-ups in it or whatever it is, that sort of thing. So this is meant to be looked at as what we explained at the beginning. We're always going to start over. No one is above starting over. No one is above walking, going back to, we have gotten you to a point where your capacity is good enough to flirt with the level of competition that you want to be at, and we want to improve and go up. Let's get that slow-mo camera out and take a peek. Let's go back and look, see where it's at. Oh, you've started to do this. You've developed this habit. Let's make sure that we change this, that sort of thing. No one is above these things, and I love the Steph Curry warm-up that he does before every game. That's God knows how long. That's him walking every single day. And if he, in terms of dribbling and shooting, needs to walk on a daily basis, you are not above that. So a CrossFitter who is like, Tola was a guy that I use the example of. Like, he used to be in the Northeast. He used to come up to the gym every once in a while. Dude, his barbell therapy warm-up, strongest man in the sport. It was incredible to watch. It was so meticulous, so detailed. And it's like, we're not going to be above this thing, right? And it's like, the level of competition continues to rise. Like, and if our shining examples of what we're chasing didn't have this mindset, they would fall off and wouldn't be the example anymore. So they don't get to rest either. Yeah. Like, they're being chased by this pack of people. They need to continue to be. So like, there's just no hiding from...
They're the ones pushing the boundary on what it turns out people can do. And anytime that barrier happens, the 4-minute mile, thing, it's like, as soon as we found out that was possible, it's like, how many people just shoved the human potential to the right by being like, oh, turns out we can do a 4-minute mile. Turns out you can snatch 225. Now everybody and their mom does. Yeah, I think the warm-up thing, I was actually going to allude to that too. Like, when you see a professional athlete, like I always love the behind the scenes, day in the life, behind the scenes, that sort of thing of a professional athlete. But when they get, again, let's think about, we'll keep the hockey example up. Like, dudes arrive at the rink and it's like their pregame prep is essentially the walk, jog, run, all just condensed over a period of a couple hours, right? But they always do start at walk, right? I get to the gym and I do go sit on a bike for 15 minutes. I start to move, I start to do some muscular activation, some like very low intensity stuff. And then I, grab a stick handling ball and I'm warming up my hands, stick handling. I get on the ice, I go out for that initial skate. And then in the NHL, it's like there's a morning skate before a game. Like I'm doing the walking and starting to jog a little bit, kind of knocking the rust off. And just that progression slowly, we add layers of intensity until, puck drop is run sprint.
Think about how dense their foundation
the walk jog
is
up to that point. Yeah.
Because their muscle memory is so many layers deep of doing that over and over and over.
Yeah. But they still do it. It's still
exactly.
like, I have, a 47 step procedure that gets me from arrive at the rink to puck drop, but I do it every single fucking day. And all of those are just opportunities to like re-ingrain what it means to walk perfectly, what it means to jog perfectly. And that, because I've done that, I can also run pretty damn near perfectly. And, when you're in that, when the stars align and whatnot, and you find yourself in the zone, we sprint.
Yeah. That's the question at the end of this podcast, and we can talk about it, but I don't know that it needs to be answered. We continue to do this thing over and over, and there are points where we've built ourselves up so well by starting over and walking and jogging and running and then walking and jogging and then running, that the challenge in front of us is so big and so tough to get into that we have to sort of like, again, fall back on that foundation and just go do it, just go execute, just express all of this stuff that we've worked on, and that's the sprinting. But again, it's more of a question of, did I just express all of this stuff that I built and then I'm going to start over again, or do I need to go back to the beginning before I can execute in that way?
Yeah, I mean, I think of the sprint as like, as the games. It's the competition that you showed up for. It's the Sunday round of golf. It's the whatever it is, the pinnacle of the thing that you're doing. The thing with the sprint is like, if you get there, you're there for such a short period of time that it's like we go back to the walk. We go return to the walk every single time. It's after the CrossFit games are done. I was sprinting for a weekend. I can't do that. It's not sustainable. Right. It's not sustainable, and it's not going to allow me to see progress. I need to step back. I need to take time off, and then we build back up, starting with walk again, right? How quickly you progress from walk to jog, well, it depends on how long you spent walking when you were first learning all that shit. And it's how long you spend in jog before you go to run. Well, that depends on how long you spent jogging before you started running. And it's, you see athletes all the time who just hit that invisible ceiling. And it's like, yeah, man, like, you are going to need to take, the real answer is you're going to need to take 3 or 4 steps back if you want to take.
Dude, the reality is so boring.
Forward. It sucks. Yeah. It's not fun.
I mean, well, it's not boring to me because I think there's an art to it. And I think it's amazing that someone would be willing to surrender to that. But it doesn't have the like sexiness attached to it. The sexiness is the end result, the sprint, that thing. And, a lot of athletes in the space wonder, like, why is she always there? How does she do what she does? Like, like anytime they interview the athletes and like who's the most underrated athlete, all like so many of the women say Paige. And of course she flies under the radar. That's part of it. But people always forget that she didn't qualify in 2020 and 2021. And when you ask her what changed, you would not believe how boring it could sound.
Yeah.
It's the warm-ups, it's the barbell therapy, it's the working on this skill, it's the, am I sleeping, am I eating the way that I should be, all of those things, right? She was so used to performing at such a high level beginning in her career in CrossFit. Before that, playing hockey, doing that thing, that she was a runner, maybe jogging every once in a while, but like that's what she did. She went out and got after it. But this sport, I mean, my God, the amount of walking and jogging in this sport before you even get a chance to do the other things is so large that if you can't surrender to those concepts of like mastering the basics, your time in the sport will be pretty short-lived.
Yeah. I think that's the wrap up, right? It's that the difference between the professional athlete who gets paid to do what you do recreationally is not that they have some sort of magic thing that they developed or that they have, or that there's not some weird hack that comes with being at the professional level. It's like they just did the boring, monotonous stuff so many more times than you are willing to do it, that they just had to be better than you.
Right.
That's all it is. They just have more reps than you, more time than you. They don't mind being in the walk, stage for fucking weeks, months, years at a time, because they know that foundation is what's going to propel them forward. It's in every sport. The skill of catching a football, it's like the iterations of that is just like, how do I catch the football and then turn and run as fast as I can? How do I, it's all the little things. There's nothing special about it. It's just the best in the world have done it so many more times than you have that it's automatic. The basics, their default setting is sprint relative to your default setting being walk.
So my final thoughts, I think, are maybe turning the opening concept into something that's a bit more macro than micro. It ended with, if you come back, you're in the game. But if you pick up your toys and go home, you're not. So, like, Hunter, can you think of an example recently where shit did not go the way that you wanted it to in the gym relative to something that maybe not necessarily super high skilled, but had some sort of movement efficiency component to it?
Fuck, bro. 1,000 things. Let's see. Can I give you a golf example, or does it need to be CrossFit?
It can be golf.
Let's go with, we were doing chest to bar pull-ups the other week. That is notoriously like I'd rather do bar muscle ups than chest to bar pull-ups.
Yep.
And it was just fucking wonky. My shoulder kind of hurt.
Yep.
I was just like,
right,
this is just bad. Like, I can do better. I have done better. I know what my capacity is generally, and this was just bad.
Yeah. So in the examples that we've used today, we would want Hunter to notice in the moment, maybe, that he wasn't moving the way that he should, and he was relying way too much on his grip strength and not his hips, would be my guess.
Yep. Classic. Yep.
The fucking guy can hold on to the pull-up bar for 6 hours. Why does he need to use his hips? The real example, the life example, is that you're going to do chest to bar pull-ups the next time that they come up. You're not done with chest to bar pull-ups.
Yeah.
It is okay and gonna happen that the fuck this, I'm done meme happens in the moment. The papers are up in the air. I don't need these. But then the guy's like, actually, I need those papers. I'm going to go pick those up. You picking those papers back up is the bigger picture idea of this. And there's actually science behind it, which is always cool if you're, less into the kind of the woo-woo stuff. I love both sides. So the science is there are neurological adaptations taking place between the time that you mess up the skill and then you come back and you try it again. And we need space in between for that to happen. So if you're not making those, you're sort of not like burning those in while you're doing it as much as your mind needs time in between. So an example, Hunter, would be the chest to bar session went really weird on a Monday, and then you went to do them again on a Thursday, and you're just feet, hips. Like, how did that happen? You know what you're trying to do. In a lot of instances, there's just some times where there could be a lot of different reasons why it wasn't the case. And your body needs to make the connection, or your mind needs to make the connection between the idea of what you're doing and that actual physical action that you're trying to do. So there's actually this idea of like leave it alone for a little bit. And that is like a really excellent example of coming back to the thing.
I mean, how many times have you like been practicing this thing for weeks, or I've been squatting for every, once a week for every week, and like my max is still not going up. You leave, you don't do the thing for a week or 2 weeks, and the next time you do it, it's like, oh my God, like I am Matt Frazier, like I am God.
Yep.
It's the same.
I feel that way with rope climbs. That's a rope climb thing for me. Every once in a while, I will do a rope climb workout. And like one of the times I was actually doing one, you were like, is that fucking Rich Froning up there? I was standing, and then I was, my hands never move before I stood, and then I go back up. And then 2 weeks later, it's like, no, dude.
Gone.
It's fucking Bob Froning.
Dick Froning.
Distant cousin.
Yeah.
What you got?
No, I was just it was funny. I was trying to remember if it was you, and then I remembered it was actually Jay, one of our members. He was he's a teacher, he's an administrator, but is in teaching with like elementary school kids. And one of the thing he was telling me, he was doing some sort of like educational seminar, whatever. They talked about a study that they did with kids, that it was basically like almost like learning intervals. And it was like the most successful kids were the group of kids that like practiced something. I want to say maybe it was like piano or something along those lines. You practice something for literally 10 seconds and then take a walk for like 20 seconds and you come back to it. And the brain activity
sounds like intervals to me.
In the brain activity in the gap was greater than when they were actually, it was typing. It wasn't the piano, it was typing. It was like, you're going to type for 10 seconds and then you're going to take a lap for whatever, 20 or 30 seconds, whatever it was. And the brain activity during the break was basically like mapping what you just did, what the kids just did, onto like, the neurological system. And that's how they that was the most effective like interval, whatever, that they studied, where it was like a really short period of work and processing and then take a break, so that the brain could essentially process and kind of map that into your neurological system. It was pretty interesting. So
you just explained why I think meatheads are the most practically intelligent people on earth. you have to fucking do the thing and work hard and rest and recover and do the fucking thing.
Yeah.
Like, that's how you get from point A to point B. Did we do it?
Yeah, that was a good one.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of the Misfit Podcast. MisfitAthletics.com for your individual programming needs. 7-day free trial to get started. You get to see a whole week of programming, to see how we do things, how we work in a lot of the concepts that we talked about today. And if you are here for affiliate programming, make sure you head to teammisfit.com or the Sugar Wad Marketplace. See you next week.
Later.